On this week's 51%, you've heard of defensive driving. How about defensive living? We sit down with self-defense experts Joy Farrow and Farrow and Frombach to discuss the tips and tricks modern-day women are using to keep themselves safe.
We want you to listen to your safety intuition most of all.
Do not be persuaded. Stand your ground. You can be a nice person, but you can bring the hammer down if you need to.
I'm Jessie King. It's all up next on 51%. You're listening to 51%, a WAMC production dedicated to women's issues and experiences. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jessie King. I've been hosting this show for a little over 2 years now, and I'm surprised to say that this is actually my first episode on self-defense. I don't really know why. I've had this subject in my head for a long time, but I do think things can get pretty heavy on this show, and I try to balance, the trials of being a woman with the joys of it. Also, as you can imagine, self-defense demonstrations are pretty hard to translate over the air. But it's worth talking about because I'm not sure there's a woman out there who hasn't had to worry about her safety at one point or another. Maybe you keep a self-defense keychain in your purse or text a loved one before going out on a run. Maybe you look up your dates online before you meet them in person or heighten your vigilance while walking out to your car at night. Gender-based violence is a global health issue, and while there are many things that we should do as a society to address that, it helps to know how to protect yourself too. Joy Farrow and Farrow and Frombach are on a mission to provide thorough self-defense training for women by women. Farrow is a retired deputy sheriff with 28 years of experience in policing and airport safety at the Broward County Sheriff's Office in Florida, while Frombach is a technologist and engineer who escaped a childhood rife with domestic abuse. Together in their new book, Street Smart Safety for Women, they encourage women and girls to listen to their safety intuition without becoming afraid or letting it restrict their day-to-day lives. As Frombach explains, it's not about fear-mongering, it's about practicing defensive living, just as you would defensive driving.
Defensive driving, you are not terrified to drive your car. You have a few strategies, a little bit of elevated awareness while you're driving, and you just drive along, hundreds of thousands of miles over our lifetime, but we're not terrified. And that's what we want women to do as well. We don't want them to live in zone red all the time, constantly looking around and being terrified. We wanted to provide them with some strategies to be persuasion-proof, to not always say yes, to use what we call your safety intuition, which is really situational awareness. But what Joy noticed, if I can jump in here and say that, what Joy noticed is that women don't use their peripheral vision because we are so focused on paying attention to what everybody else wants from us, including strangers on the street, that we usually don't pay attention to what our own instincts are telling us. So that's kind of what we use as the basis for what we call our defensive living strategy.
And our daily living, what you should do on a daily basis to keep yourself safe without having to arm up with everything.
The way that we ourselves live our daily lives.
So how do you go about developing your safety intuition and listening to it?
We all have it. Safety intuition isn't some magic ability that Joy developed from her years on the street or I developed growing up with domestic violence. Everybody has it because it is our five senses reporting back to our subconscious that let us know that we're in danger. So some of the physical signals that every one of us has experienced is the hair on the back of your neck going up, that feeling in the pit of your stomach, or just an overall general feeling, sometimes on dates when you're out with a creepy person that says, you know what, something just doesn't ring true with this. But we are so polite as women. We're conditioned to be so polite. We think, you know what? I just don't want to hurt their feelings. And that's what we want to encourage women to do is you can be polite. You can be a nice person. We're both nice people. But when it comes to your personal safety, sometimes we can be too nice. And that's what we want women to pay attention to.
But what I realized is that predators know how polite women are. So they're just as nice. And some of them are just as good looking. So all of a sudden, women tend to let their guard down and they close that gap and they get a little closer. It's a stranger. So you still need to keep your distance and realize, what are they asking me? Why do they want me to go over there? I'll call help for you, but that's not the first thing. He's a nice person. Oh, what happened? And immediately everything went out the window and I'm going right into, I don't know. I'm going behind a building. I'm going somewhere. I have no idea what I'm doing.
But I want to help.
Yes.
But I want to help.
Yes.
Like I said, women, we're conditioned to not leave people in peril.
One of our other issues that we found this with a lot of people was opening your car window, mainly because women want to be polite. That's a danger right there. You can talk through your window. Mm-hmm. As soon as women open that window, it doesn't matter who it is. They don't know the person. In comes a knife, in comes a gun, in comes a person, and it's danger from there.
Right.
I appreciate you bringing that up because I can certainly recall a few times where, I'm on my way to work, stopped at a stoplight, and someone comes up out of nowhere trying to start a conversation at my window. And I remember just thinking, I don't know what they want. I have no idea what to do in this situation, And you don't want to be rude, but, in that case, it was before daylight. I figured if my window doesn't open for anybody before the sun comes up. But, it happens.
It's not a drive-through. Your window is not a drive-through. You do not have to automatically open it, but people get conditioned just because, like what you're saying, I don't want to be rude. Well, you need to be safe, first off.
Well, do you have any other tips on the situational awareness front? You don't want these things to stop your life. So what are some good in-the-moment tips that you can take with you if you're, say, going out for a run?
Sometimes you can use, when you're out and around, you can use the windows of stores if you're running in that area. You can use them as mirror. You can use your own phone without turning it on. You can hold it up and you can use it as a mirror quickly to see if somebody's coming up alongside you while you're running. And this way you could get a full view, like a rear view mirror.
Also, when you have headphones or hopefully earbuds in, put them in transparency mode. Don't put them in, noise blocking mode, because you are actually kneecapping your ability to be able to detect if there's danger. So you can put it in, transparency mode and hear people coming up around you. And, kind of like glance from side to side and use that peripheral vision as well. Just kind of keep a general awareness of your area because your body knows. I mean, consider our ancestors on the savannah. They were with fierce predators all the time. And imagine if they had been raised like us to suppress their safety intuition, how long would they be alive on the savannah? Well, when women are out and about walking and running, we're in the same situation. So we have those natural gifts, that natural ability to be able to detect predators. We need to be aware of it.
When I was in college, my aunt got me a self-defense keychain, and I remember feeling kind of silly about it at the time. But do you recommend anything like that? I mean, without mentioning products per se, are those kinds of things actually helpful or more just comforting?
Absolutely. I'm a big proponent of the sprays. And even the loud sonics are awesome. Any of those are great. A flashlight, even during the day, pointed at somebody's eyes can disorient them in strobe mode. So these are little things that even though you're jogging or you're outside, and, also when people are going to exercise, it's really nice in certain areas of the country and you want to go to that quiet area, then you need to think safety. There's always something along the way. Mm-hmm. Even if you picked up a tree branch or just something, even a rock, just to know that you had one thing with you, or else you're just going to have to use your hands and feet,
Okay, so we've been talking about general ways to keep yourself safe when you're out and about, but studies show you're most likely to face abuse or violence from someone you know. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Laura, I don't know if you would be comfortable sharing your experience, but do you have any tips for spotting unhealthy behavior or an unhealthy relationship?
As a survivor of domestic violence growing up, and having done a lot of research on it, during my adult life, just because it was such a strange way to grow up. And, I didn't realize it at the time because I just thought that violence was normal. But what I've realized is that domestic violence and domestic abuse are about power and control. And one of the things that I think is so important for women is to realize that while we're dating. And some of those signs of power and control can show up on the first date. Here's an example. You had a good time, the evening's getting ready to end. Maybe you have to go to school or work the next morning and you say, you know what, I had a great time. Let's do this again. I got to get up in the morning. And your date says, you know what, just one more. That's a sign of power and control. Now, if you've both been having a great time, it's really hard to say no. But also in the back of your mind, remember, that's a sign of power. That's a sign of being controlled. And if you say no a couple times and they keep coaxing you, and they can be a man or a woman, domestic violence is not isolated to one gender or the other. If they keep coaxing you once you've said no, and you finally say, okay, congratulations, you've shown that you can be controlled. The way that the person treats the wait staff is another. Do they treat that wait staff as though they're their private wait staff? Or do they realize, I'm in a public place and this person's doing their job? And so these are just tiny signs of power and control to look for. But the big thing to recognize is that is about power and control. And the final thing that I'll say about dating is it is so important to realize that love bombing is step one of the process of domestic violence and abuse, because it is a process. And what love bombing is when the person showers you with attention and gifts early on, and you say, this is it. Somebody finally realizes how important I am and how special I am. And that is so hard to recognize because we're involved in it too. But love bombing is the hook. Love bombing is the emotional hook that abusers use, because it's almost like, some people have talked about drugs. It's that first hit that gets them. Well, it's that first hit of love bombing that says, oh my gosh, you're the one. And then when things devolve, as they are going to do, we say to ourselves, and the same way my mother did, I remember when it was good. If I just hang in there long enough, it'll be good again. But the truth of the matter is that it will never be the way that it was in the beginning. So that's important for women to realize, I think.
And then you're starting to miss red flags.
Right.
When you're making excuses for somebody's behavior, but your friends are telling you, and we're noticing a lot of this from college students, that their friends are telling them he's not right for you, or you're hearing from ex-girlfriends, or he's telling, oh, they're always saying that about me. That's a problem. People break up, but if you're hearing abuse, or he was mean, or he actually physically abused you, or stalking, these are little things that aren't going to be different for the next person. So women start saying, well, he's really cute, or he's really nice, or he's very smart. Okay, very smart doesn't have anything to do with their behavior. It's something to look out for, and it's a red flag.
What if you're already in a situation where there's abuse? We've done multiple episodes on this show about how to find someone to talk to, how to safely come up with an exit plan, things like that. Because, the point of leaving can often be the most dangerous time for survivors of domestic violence. But do you have any advice on that front if you find yourself in a situation where the abuse is already present and it's too late to look for signs?
Sometimes you just need to start planning an exit if you're in a live-in relationship. Married is another thing. Sometimes that's a little more complicated, and you may have to get friends or, advice from therapists also. What can I do with my money, and how can I start making an exit bit by bit so they don't put the stops on it or start hiding money from you, things like that. Or if you start to see that, that's a time to start taking your money and opening another account. But, if you're living together and you can get out, the best thing to do is get out if you're that fearful, and start talking to a friend and do what you can to get out before it gets bad, and it will.
It's never going to get any better. To go back even to when you're on a date, if you feel threatened, if your safety intuition goes off, if you think, things are going bad and I need to get out, just get out. Don't worry so much about the other person's feelings. If you believe that person is going to attack you, and you are saying to yourself, I don't want to hurt their feelings, what does that say about you and your relationship with yourself? And, Joy has said so many times when she was talking to victims, if I can jump in and use your words, when Joy was talking to victims, that the women said, you know what? My intuition went off and I knew I should get out of that situation, but I didn't do it. So just leave. Whatever you have to do, if you're in a restaurant, even if you're in an intimate situation and you think, you know what, this is going south, leave as quickly as you can and do whatever you need to get out. Be loud. Don't worry about being a nice girl. Worry about yourself.
But even if it doesn't, get to that point, but you're starting to get feelings that I don't like the way this person's acting, and telling them that I don't like the way you're acting is not going to work, because then it starts getting manipulative, and the argument starts going back and forth. At that point, then you really just have to quietly say, I'm just going to start another life out of here. And you really don't even have to announce it. So they start planning. You need to enlist your own friends, keep it quiet, and not tell them, because that usually going to start ruffle their feathers. They're going to start following you. They're going to start stalking if that hasn't already happened. That's where you want to start backing yourself out, keeping it quiet until you can quietly find another place to be. Start a bank account somewhere else that they don't know of. Have that obviously not go to your own address. Those are little things that you can, try before things get worse, and you don't have to stay in a relationship.
We're speaking with Joy Farrow and Laura Frombach, authors of Street Smart Safety for Women, Your Guide to Defensive Living. We've mostly been talking about how to protect ourselves physically, but advances in technology have unfortunately been used to hurt women in other ways too. What advice do you have for protecting yourself online?
Do not give your phone to anyone else. Do not give your password to anyone else. Apps can be put on phones. AirTags. AirTags are, those little devices that can be used to track your luggage, your purse, your backpack, etc. Those were invented to track things. They're also being used to track people. Cyber stalkers can put an AirTag on your license plate, an AirTag in your child's backpack, an AirTag in your purse. They can get on your phone and put very covert applications on your phone so that they know absolutely every app, everyone you're talking to, every text you have. And, the Supreme Court recently made it much more difficult to prosecute cyber stalkers. So the technology cards are actually stacked against women. And we have to do everything we can to keep our technology private, no matter how close you are to somebody. If that relationship goes south, they have the ability right here to have a window into your life and know exactly what you're doing all the time.
And it should be a red flag that if somebody just starts dating someone and they start going through your phone, that's a red flag.
Right.
That means they're not trusting you for some reason, and they need to look at your phone.
Right.
That's a problem.
That goes back to the power and control.
How about scammers? I feel like I hear stories all the time where people were scammed or catfished into giving away money. And I guess the fact that we keep hearing them must mean that it's working, it's still happening. How do you spot a scammer?
Boy, scammers are a tough one. Scammers have been around since the dawn of time. Technology has just made it easier for them to do what they do because now they don't have to be physically present. Deep fakes are making that much more difficult because now artificial intelligence has made it much more difficult for people to tell the difference between technology and, a real voice. So some things that people can do is to, the obvious, don't click on links. The obvious, don't click on texts. Don't accept calls even from people that you think that you know, unless you actually hear their voice, because people can impersonate your number to your parents, your kids, or whatever, to your significant other, and pretend that it's you calling for help. Mm-hmm. And so you can have a code word, you can have a safe word, that if these things happen to you, then you have the ability to think a little bit further ahead and to be able to plan how you can counteract some of these scams.
Scammers have come up with sending messages that look exactly like companies that you do business with. So immediately you would look at a company like Verizon and say, oh my gosh, I owe $500 and it looks very real. But you need to look at it closely before you start sending money. Click on this to pay your account. Right. Or, we're going to cancel Netflix if you don't click on this. But if you look at it closely before you start clicking on a link, you'll notice something in there is wrong. Right. And those are little things that can help you before you click on it and send money.
Here's another strategy. What do police do? If a witness gives a statement, they try and verify that statement. So you can do the same thing with technology. If you have an incoming text or an incoming link or whatever, and it says, Bank of America, you can go to your Bank of America app and see. So you can always get a second verification before you take any action. Right. But again, we are so accustomed to knee-jerk, reacting to something. I think probably the best advice that we can give people is stop and pause, don't react, and look for another way to approach this. And, scammers always push. They always want you to take that first reaction. And if you can resist taking that first reaction and you can verify, you'll be a step ahead of the game.
Well, and usually what they do is when they're scamming you, they're threatening you. Mm-hmm. So you're nervous. Oh, I have to get this in by such and such a time. So that's where the scared part is. I'm going to have to send this money. If you don't send this money now, and that's where people get scared and they're like, well, it said I should have sent the money. Well, now you've put in your bank account and, all that information. So you could always ask a friend if you're not sure and you need a little further information.
That's a good point. A few months ago, I remember getting a really weird message from one of my friends on Instagram, basically asking for money. And it was out of character for her to ask, so I asked what was wrong. And they immediately replied, I'm sorry, I can't talk now, but I'll promise I'll pay you back. It's an emergency, please. And it was so weird, and it seemed like there was so much pressure to pay. So eventually I was like, all right, no more talking over direct message. I called my friend, and she immediately picked up the phone and was just like, don't do it. I've been hacked. Don't respond.
Yes.
She It's like I've been
exactly.
I've been getting calls all day.
Right.
You verified.
It's scary though.
It is. Yeah. Because he's like, you don't want to be the person who just like, shuts your friend down. But at the same time, it's like, okay, good. So that, my gut was right on that one.
Right.
Well, on a broader note here, is there anything you think we can do as a society or that our leaders can do to help fight gender-based violence? Because, women shouldn't have to be doing any of these things, but we do.
I will say that there is not one government that is addressing violence against women. And this is not just in the United States. Violence against women is increasing all over the world. There is not one government, and that's really what needs to happen, is this needs to be addressed on a governmental level. Now, we have the Violence Against Women Act in the United States, and that's great, but we need so much more. We need judicial, we need law enforcement updates, we need law updates, we need legal updates. And one of the issues that we bring up in the book is that technology, the laws addressing technology have not been updated since the late 90s. And, Congress has refused to act. That's for a lot of reasons. And on both sides of the House, we're not pointing fingers, but we believe that this is a global emergency. The World Health Organization says it's a global emergency. The World Health Organization and the United Nations says that violence against women is a global pandemic. They call it a shadow pandemic. And that's really what our true goal is to raise awareness on a global level, because if there was any other group in the world that this violence was being created against, there would be legal ramifications across the world. But the World Health Organization says that 1 in 3 women globally have been the victim of sexual or physical violence at least once in their life. And if you look at 8 billion, the population of 8 billion, that's over 1 billion women. Consider those ramifications of violence against over 1 billion women, 1 billion people.
Scary.
Well, Laura and Joy, thanks so much for taking the time. Any final tips you'd like to leave for us?
We want you to listen to your safety intuition. Most of all, be aware of your surroundings and your contact with strangers, and try to be persuasion-proof.
Right. Do not be persuaded. Stand your ground. You can be a nice person, but you can bring the hammer down if you need to.
Laura Frombach is a technologist and engineer, while Joy Farrow is a retired deputy sheriff with 28 years of experience in policing and airport safety. Their new book, Street Smart Safety for Women, Your Guide to Defensive Living, is out now through Health Communications, Inc. You can find it at most major booksellers and learn more at their website, streetsmartsafety.org. Just a note that if you or someone you love has been impacted by domestic violence, please know you're not alone and help is available. The National Domestic Violence Hotline provides 24/7 support online at thehotline.org and at 1-800-799-7233. Laura and Joy, thanks so much for taking the time.
Jessie, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Love it.
Thanks for listening to this week's 51%. 51% is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio in Albany, New York. It's produced and hosted by me, Jesse King. Our associate producer is Jody Cowan, and our theme is Lolita by the Albany-based artist Girl Blue. Just a reminder, you can listen to 51% anytime at WAMCpodcast.org or wherever you get your podcasts. On social media, we're at WAMC Radio, and you can stay in the loop by signing up for our weekly newsletter Airwaves at WAMC.org. We hope you'll join us next week. Until then, I'm Jesse King, 51%.